The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters was originally broadcast on July 19th, 2022.
Aloha and welcome, Maui, to the Maui Chamber of Commerce Business Matters radio show, sponsored by Mokulele Airlines. I'm your host, Pamela Tumpop of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, and today we're going to cover an update on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce efforts to support businesses. We're going to hear from the Maui Invasive Species Committee, known as MISC, to get an update on how we are addressing our invasive species challenges. And we're going to learn more about what's going on at the Kahului Airport. But first, we are going to welcome back the Executive Director of the Western Regional Office of Congressional and Public Affairs Division of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Jennings Imel. Before joining the Chamber in 2013, Jennings worked in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Association of Former Members of Congress and at the public affairs firm of Mercury, Clark, and Weinstock. Jennings received a master's degree in international affairs from the George Washington University and bachelor's degrees in political science and German from the University of California, Riverside. Jennings, aloha and good morning. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Aloha, Pam. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Thank you. Well, Jennings is coming to us from sunny and very hot, he said, California this morning. And speaking of hot, things are really heating up. Maybe you could give us an update this morning on all the things that are going on the Hill. Well, we don't have time for all the things going on the Hill, but we'll start with an update.
Sure, maybe not all the things, but certainly a lot going on, and a lot needs to happen, quite frankly, in a very limited amount of time. Just because there aren't that many weeks left until the midterms for Congress to actually be in D.C. and doing legislative work. So if you look at the calendar, there's essentially about a couple of weeks left here in July where the House is going to be in. It's got one more week for the Senate. And then both the House and Senate are back in their districts and then their states in August, and then they go back in September to D.C. for a few more weeks. So essentially what we're looking at is 5 or 6 more weeks of work being done in Washington, D.C. Before the midterm elections, because October is, you're in full campaign mode at that point, and folks are going to be out of town. So very limited amount of time to get some big things done. Obviously, we've got spending bills. We're keeping an eye on that. NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. We've got deadlines looming, as always, September 30th. But this month, a lot of the focus, and this week in particular, has been on the CHIPS Act. That's kind of the bill to provide about $52 billion in funding to assist in semiconductor and microchip manufacturing here in the United States. There's also a tax credit provision in there as well. That's where the focus is. This kind of comes from previous versions. There was a Senate bill that was much larger called USICA, and then a House bill called Competes. Those bills were passed kind of separately. There was a conference where the House and Senate came together to try to negotiate differences. This was the first time, by the way, that the House and Senate had undergone the conference process in over 10 years, if you could believe it. And you had over 100 conferees named on the House side. So not very easy to come to an agreement when you have so many people involved in the negotiating process. And so probably not surprisingly, they weren't able to get to an agreement on either USICA or Competes or what the kind of compromise would look like. So they're sticking to something very basic and simple, which is just the CHIPS Act, laser focused on semiconductor manufacturing, bringing those supply chains back to the United States in an effort not only to compete with China, but to secure, our own national security interests and make our supply chains less vulnerable. So that we expect that action to happen later this week. There's probably going to be a vote on that, maybe a couple of other provisions included later in the week. And then, everybody's kind of keeping an eye on the parliamentarian in the Senate to see if the much scaled down version of reconciliation, I think you all recall the Build Back Better bill from last year, which was, multi-trillion-dollar bill, which, Senator Manchin opposed, kind of blew up that whole process. It's been scaled down on numerous other occasions. Now they're just looking at prescription drug provisions and they're running that through the Senate parliamentarian to see if that would qualify for reconciliation. which essentially would mean that it would only need 51 votes to pass the Senate instead of 60. Those negotiations are underway, and they'll be trying to take that up potentially next week. So those are the two bills that we're looking out for. We oppose that particular piece of legislation because there's kind of price control components on there on prescription drugs, but we at the U.S. Chamber do support the CHIPS Act and are hopeful that we can get a bipartisan vote on that, get it to the president's desk and signed into law. How's
that looking in this time frame we were just talking about?
Good question. I think we're pretty bullish on the CHIPS Act. There's bipartisan support for doing something around this issue. We did a coalition letter that had over 200 chambers from around the country, including, I believe, the Maui Chamber signed on to that, which we sent to the Hill earlier this year. The business community is rallied behind it. If you look at the USICA, which was the larger bill that included a number of other components as well, that passed the Senate with bipartisan support, both Democrats and Republicans. I believe there were something like 17, 18 Republicans that voted in addition to all the Democrats on that bill. So we know that there's kind of bipartisan support on this general issue. It's just, whenever you get close to election time, obviously it becomes a little bit more challenging to get some of these things done. Yes. And especially, with the temptation, I think there is a temptation that, with Republicans probably taking over the House next year, does it make sense for them to kind of hold out and wait to draft their own bill next year? There's kind of that calculation that's going on. But I think overall, we're pretty bullish on getting the CHIPS Act across the finish line in the Senate and getting it done in the House and to the president's desk this year, and within the time frame.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we stand ready to help. That's important legislation. I know that the U.S. Chamber always has their finger on the economic pulse of our nation. Can you give us an update? We keep talking about and hearing about what's happening in the stock market. We could be heading towards recession. Can you give us an update on where you see the state of the economy?
Yeah, well, that's another big one. Obviously, we're very dialed into what's happening on the ground with small businesses and mid-sized businesses really of all sizes across all industry sectors. Kind of the pressures that they're facing, what the economic circumstances are. We all understand it's a challenging time right now with inflation. Inflation is the top concern. Of course, that's of no surprise to you. 9.1%. We know the numbers. 9.1%, 40-year high. That's what we saw from last month. We expect those numbers to probably stay in that same general range. When we polled our small businesses a couple of weeks ago, 44% cited inflation as their top concern. About 90% cited it as a major concern. So that's pretty stunning, but not surprising. And 69% of small businesses polled said that they'd already increased prices as a result of inflation. Mm-hmm. This is a major concern for business. And then what comes next? The fact that the Fed has already gone through several rounds of interest rate hikes. That they're expected to do another 0.75% hike when they meet next week, I believe. And so now that is starting to emerge as a top concern. When we polled those in the same poll, when we polled small businesses, we found that 15% cited interest rate hikes now as their top concern. That was up from 7% the previous quarter. So I think, borrowing costs for small business have continued to rise of late, and we think that's a very, very disconcerting trend, and businesses are going to be hit hard by that. But at the same time, we've seen kind of some surprising results in the polls that we've done, and that business optimism is actually fairly strong, and that businesses see their own situation in a fairly positive light. 73% of businesses that we polled said that they were comfortable with their cash flow. 66% said that their own personal business is doing well and in good health. But on the other side of that token, 30% said that the overall U.S. economy is in good health. So we've never seen that kind of a gap between how businesses feel about their own business and how they feel about the broader economy at large. So I think that is disconcerting, but it's good to see that businesses are feeling still pretty confident. We're still seeing fairly high consumer demand and in hospitality and leisure, and you see it obviously on Maui and Hawaii. Yes. There's still a lot of demand there that still seems to be pretty robust. So that's a good thing, but inflation is something we have to tackle. And obviously the concerns about a potential recession if the Fed pumps the brake too hard, those are real.
Right.
But at the U.S. Chamber, in addition to those legislative items that I already mentioned, we continue to be laser focused on tackling inflation. We talk to the administration, we talk to Congress about, first of all, stop blaming the business community for inflation. We continue to see kind of those lines of attack from the Biden administration, whether it's going after oil or refiners, or even, gas station owners, right? Independently owned small business gas station owners that operate on extremely thin margins. There was that tweet from a couple of weeks ago, demanding that they lower prices. I mean, that sort of thing is not helpful. That's not the problem. This is a supply and demand issue. Congress has to take this seriously. And on the supply side, that's where we need to focus. We need to increase supply and, most importantly, increase domestic energy production,
right.
Or at least signal that we're open to doing that sort of thing. Just by doing that, we can bring down the cost of gasoline, the cost of oil per barrel. We could signal to the market, signal to oil companies to make those kind of investments, whether it's in refiners or upstream production and things like that, that they need to make in order to put us on more stable footing price-wise, not only in the near term, but long term. So we'd like to see the administration pivot in that direction. Unfortunately, they haven't, but we're going to continue to put pressure on them and on Congress to do exactly that. And, going to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and asking for more production from those kind of countries, we don't think that that's the solution. The solution is right in our backyard. We have the capacity to solve this problem with our own oil and natural gas, and we need to be focused intently on that. And, other things, whether we're talking about reducing regulations, tariffs, there's still obviously tariffs in place that are kind of, leading to some of these price increases and putting pressure on kind of inflation. Those are things that we need to look at as well, and we've been talking to the administration to address those issues too. So we're laser focused on inflation because we see that as the biggest threat to the economy right now and to small business.
It really is a huge threat. And I'm glad to know that you're working in all of those areas, and again, in an island state surrounded by water where we import, a huge percentage. Nobody can exactly tell us how much of goods and services are imported because we just don't track all of that, at the border to find out how much is coming in. But, people will say, the local economists will say 80%. Most people figure it's over 90%. And so, right. This is a very challenging time for us. And the other thing that the general public, as they hear a lot of this discussion, and as you point out, the tweets that kind of point fingers at businesses, but when businesses' costs go up, those costs get passed on. And so the consumers then bear the cost. And right now, housing is such a big issue. And one of the things that we've talked about is we had a great opportunity when interest rates were really low to spend more money in investment at our county level and state level on affordable housing and rentals. And now we're seeing all those interest rates rise and supply chain issues where the inputs to build the housing are rising. So now we've sort of hurt ourselves by not getting the programs that we could have gotten off the ground much earlier. So it's a very challenging time. And, here on Maui, that leads to our local elections that are coming up. But I know you folks are also very focused on what you think is going to happen in the midterm elections. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So, obviously it's midterm election season right now. We're kind of well underway in that regard. And, at the U.S. Chamber, we do endorse in federal races, so House and Senate. So there are a number of races that we're keeping an eye on, and we're going to be very involved. And really kind of the three pillars that we talk about at the U.S. Chamber when we're talking about our political objectives for this year are kind of on offense. We want to grow the number of pro-business, pro-chamber, pro-governing members of Congress. So that means, challengers or in open seats, we're going to be weighing in and making endorsements that are going to make a difference for folks that, not only align with our values and believe in free enterprise and are going to support job creators, but also are going to work across the aisle because we need, folks in both parties, Republican and Democrat, to be willing to do that. And on defense, so that's on the offense side. On the defense side, we're going to be supporting elected officials, so members of Congress that are currently in office that are doing those things at the moment, that are doing the tough work, whether it's Republicans that voted for the infrastructure bill, or Democrats, like your own Ed Case, although it doesn't represent Maui, next door in Oahu, who really did a lot of great work behind the scenes to push for the infrastructure bill to come up for a vote and push back against what leadership was trying to do and tying that bill to the massive Build Back Better reconciliation bill. I mean, that kind of work that he did behind the scenes was huge. And it was Congressman Case and, quite frankly, just a handful of other Democrats that really pushed back and led the charge against leadership to make sure that we got that infrastructure vote across the finish line. And, of course, it helped us to defeat that big tax and spend bill, the Build Back Better bill. So, those are exactly the kind of members that we're going to be looking at on the defense side that share our values and work across the aisle and really are interested in governing and getting things done. And then, of course, we're going to be mobilizing constituents. That means chamber community, business community, to get out there and to engage with us, whether that's in endorsement opportunities or just to get out there and vote and get their employees registered and things like that to vote. That sort of thing is going to be important. We need the business community at the table more so now than ever. And I think it all kind of plays in the greater context of what we're seeing, what we've been seeing historically over the last 20 or so years. Every election, right, has been essentially a change election. Yeah. In the last 25 years, with the exception of 2004 and 2012, we've had a change election. We're going to have a change election this year. That means we're expecting the House to flip from Democrat to Republican. The Senate might flip from Democrat to Republican. Of course, we're still going to have divided government with President Biden in the White House. So what that means is that we're going to be probably looking for the foreseeable future at divided government. We're going to be going back and forth, Republican control to Democrat control. And that means the center of gravity, the folks that are going to truly make the biggest difference in getting bills to the president's desk and across the finish line and addressing the issues that the business community needs to be addressed, those folks are going to be in the middle. Those are going to be the centrist Republicans and Democrats, folks like people that are on the Problem Solvers Caucus, like Congressman Case, another shout out for him on the Problem Solvers Caucus, and then those moderates in the Senate, right? You've seen kind of those moderates, the Gang of 10 or Gang of 20, that have really been the folks moving legislation. It hasn't really been through the committees or leadership as much. It's kind of been through those folks in the middle, and I think that that's going to continue to be the trend over the next several years, well into the foreseeable future, from what we can see. And so that's why we need to build out that bench of, folks doesn't matter what you have next to your name, but that you're willing to work with each other and that you're going to be there for business and for the free enterprise system.
We see this all the time. And, of course, the division in government that we keep watching at the national level is so disconcerting for so many people. I mean, they just want to see things get done, and they're tired of watching the fights going on back and forth, and the cost and expense. And again, like, our small example of just what we could have done if we could have just come together in housing at a time when it was much easier to develop. Interest rates were low, when we were fighting for some affordability, and things like going back and, we talk about getting the chips manufactured back in the U.S. We've had policy that drove businesses overseas to do this work. We lost technology. We lost capacity in the U.S. in terms of our manufacturing capacity. And I've done a lot of work on the front lines on that here locally. But, there's so much that we have allowed to go on, and now we're trying to bring it back, and we're still debating. It's something that we all know we need. Chip manufacturing drives everything these days and is such a huge part of our lives. So it's, I'm glad to know. And one of the things that we always share, we do candidate endorsements as well here locally. I know you know that, but for the public, the chamber is nonpartisan, non-sectarian, but we definitely are a business membership organization to support a strong and healthy and sustainable economy. And it's a challenge because so much of the rhetoric these days makes earning a profit a bad word when you can't sustain a business without a profit. And we get to some of these things of finger pointing, and where we just need to find ways to come together. And so I'm glad, even though, you were telling the story of, it was, I think you said the first time in a decade that you were using the conferencing process.
Right.
And while they stacked it so that it didn't quite work with too many on the House side. But the fact that it's those processes where we have better dialogue. We've got to find ways to do that. So and it makes for sustainable solutions. Right.
When you have buy-in from both sides, you're not going to be relitigating, an issue 5, 10, 15 years after that, right? If you have buy-in from both parties.
Yes. So I know that the U.S. Chamber does a tremendous amount of work walking across the aisles, working with all sides to educate, inform, have them come to you. You're an available resource to them. How can we help? I know you mentioned, and we do sign on to different letters. What else do you feel that we or the general public can do to help in this matter? And many people locally feel like, well, how do we affect change at the national level? What would your advice be for them?
Yeah, I think, obviously continue to sign on to letters and things like that, and writing op-eds and that sort of thing, weighing in on issues. But I think probably what's most helpful, maybe it's not, the most helpful in the short term in the next couple of years, but I think long term, big picture, it absolutely is the most helpful. And that's what you said, getting involved in the political process, making endorsements. And if you can't make endorsements, do forum candidates, do, candidate schools, boot camps, whatever you have to do. Identify folks that are in the community that have a business background, that are interested in running for office, and groom them to the best of your abilities to be able to run for office and to succeed, because we need to build a bench of folks that have a business background, that have the experience of signing the names on the front of a paycheck, and can bring that experience to any level of government. Obviously it's great when they can get to D.C., but the only way they're going to get to D.C. is if they usually have to work their way up through the ranks first, right? At the local level, state level, and then they can make their way to D.C. So that's where I think local chambers play such an integral role, and you all at the Maui Chamber, and I applaud you for getting involved and doing endorsements, because we need to build that bench of just, elected officials that get the concerns of the business community, that understand what it means to make a payroll. And that's just something that we're losing. We don't have enough individuals in elected office with that kind of experience, and that's where chambers, I think, can play a vital role. So, appreciate everything that the Maui Chamber is doing on that front, and obviously encourage your members to get involved as well.
Well, I deeply appreciate that. And just a quick aside, and I know we're going to have to go quickly, but I always joked with a former president of the University of Hawaii with their political science degrees, of which, they graduated many students with political science degrees, and we deeply appreciate that. But I always said, is economics a required course? And the challenge was it's not.
Right.
So I'm a big advocate of economics being a required course for a political science degree.
Yep. Agree. I can't believe it's not. Yep,
yeah.
I agree.
Well, at least not here, but maybe in others. It is an elective at the University of Hawaii. But anyway, on another front, just because to round out the education process, I think that's really important. Jennings, thank you so much, and thanks, of course, to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. But thank you for all that you do to continue to help and educate and work on addressing issues and moving important bills forward so that we can solve these grand challenges of infrastructure and chip manufacturing and supply chain issues, and looking at our energy production and seeing what we can do here locally in the U.S. All very important and exciting things. So thank you for all your work, and we look forward to having you on again, because your briefings are extremely informative for us.
No, likewise. No, I'm happy to do it anytime, and thank you for having me, Pam, and thank you for your tremendous partnership and support. It's much appreciated.
It's our great pleasure. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Aloha.
Thanks.
We're going to take a quick break from our sponsor, Mokulele Airlines, and be right back.
Mokulele Airlines operates the largest commuter airline hub in the country, right here in Kahului. Fly Mokulele from Kahului to Molokai, Lanai, Hana, Waimea, Kona, and now Hilo. Mokulele also operates the only flights between Kapalua and Honolulu. There is never a middle seat on Mokulele, and every seat has a window and aisle. Visit mokuleleairlines.com and take your next flight from the newly renovated Mokulele Terminal.
All right, we're back, and it is a great pleasure to welcome Serena Fukushima, she is from Kaneohe, Oahu, but has been the Public Relations and Education Specialist for the Maui Invasive Species Committee since November of 2020. Her previous experience includes running internship programs at Haleakala National Park for middle school through college-age students. What a fun program to do. And program manager for the Nahua Ho'ohuli, i.e. Kapono, is that correct? Conservation Leadership Intern Program. She holds a bachelor's degree in environmental studies and a graduate degree in education from both the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Aloha, Serena. We're so glad to have you on the show today.
Aloha, Pamela. Mahalo for having me.
It's my great pleasure. So we're here to talk about things that the Maui Invasive Species Committee is doing. And one of the things that has always been top of mind for me, at least over the last several years, is little fire ants. At one point, we talked about how the Big Island couldn't eradicate, but we seem to still be in that window. How are we doing?
Mahalo, Pamela. We're doing pretty well. So Maui in total has had 18 little fire ant infestations.
What?
5 have been eradicated. 6 are in the monitoring phase, which lasts about 5 to 10 years. And 7 are currently active and being in treatment. Our island's largest little fire ant population is in the Hiku, and it's in very dense, steep, thick, vegetative terrain. And so we obtained a special use permit to treat this area via helicopter, which is the first time that this has been done with the type of bait we're using. The first aerial treatment was in October of 2019, and an area of about 175 acres has been treated about 17 times.
Wow.
Thinking of our last heliops, but it's looking promising over there. So we did 2 all-staff surveys during last year. And we had crew out there, spaced out, putting vials in to test to see what ants may still be present.
Okay.
And some of that included army crawling under how thickets and in the mud and the rain. And our staff, they did it. And the result of analyzing this is that 95% of the vials were empty.
Oh,
So
good.
the treatments are working.
Good. What can people do? I know there was a lot of education, and I've had some people say, hey, that peanut butter test on the chopsticks still works great. I've had others say, not sure. What can people do? And one of the big things is buy plants locally in your local region. We don't want to keep bringing them in from other islands. But what else can we do?
So I think it's really important to get in the habit of reporting stinging ants. So just like how we take our slippers off before we walk into a house, getting into the habit of calling MISC if you're getting stung by ants. This is really one of the best ways that we can find out if there's LFA infestations. Majority of the infestations that we learned about were from the community reporting it.
Okay.
So calling, reporting stinging ants. You can test as well. We do have free test kits at stoptheant.org that folks can ask to get mailed to them, and they can use peanut butter. If they're allergic to peanut butter, they can use mayonnaise. So lots of ways to test. And of course, quarantining any plants that you do bring in, testing them as well to make sure that you're not bringing it into your area. Mulch piles too.
Mulch piles too, yes. That's something I don't recall us talking about. That, and I don't remember the mayo at all, so that's great information.
They love protein. Little fire ants are like the bodybuilders of the ant world. They just love their protein.
Oh, okay. Let me ask you something, because you're mentioning this, and I probably should have called, but I didn't even think about it. We have little black ants that bite and they sting, but it doesn't last more than a minute, but it stings. Is that something new?
They could potentially be black house ants, but I would still say send them in.
Send them in. Okay, so if you've got ant problems, and particularly if they're those really teeny tiny ones, but you want to make sure that you're sending them into MISC and letting them decide what the issues are and because then they provide solutions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have great staff on hand that love receiving little fire ant samples and are essentially creating a database of ants that they receive. So even if it's not a little fire ant, it's still going into the records of what ants are here and present in Hawaii.
Oh, good to know. Okay. Yeah, because new things are brought in all the time. So this is something really important that we want to keep up with.
Yeah, so I would say at one point, one new plant or animal arrived to our islands before human contact every 1,500 years or so. Now we have something new coming every 3 days.
Wow.
So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to escape into the environment and become invasive, but we do have, quite an influx of new things coming in due to our heightened transportation.
Okay, folks. 1 in every 1,500 years to 1 in every 3 days.
Yeah, and that is human-driven.
And that is human-driven. And also the reason why some of the new arenas that we're talking about for visitor industry management. The education component is so important to help people understand that. But it also starts with us. We have to understand it so that we can educate and share it with others as well. So let's, another effort that you folks have been doing is Cokey Frogs.
Yes.
How are we doing on that?
Everybody,
oh my gosh,
everybody knows they're Cokey. So we've had a total of 34 populations of Cokey frogs on Maui. A population is 5 or more calling males.
Okay.
22 have been eradicated, 2 are in a monitoring phase, and 10 are under active treatment. And that is essentially that main infestation area in Maliko Gulch, bordering the Ha'iku area. But MIST does respond to outlier frog reports. So if you're in Lahaina or Wailuku and you think you hear that, then you give us a call, and we have a staff that come over and check it out and try to capture the frog. And we do have 10 Cokey team members right now that work long into the night. They control the pests with food-grade 14% citric acid solution, which is found in cheese. And our team members, they go deep into the gulches, and they also work with our residents with our community Cokey control program. And so, the community Cokey control program is where MIST comes, we train and we deliver equipment to residents in the Ha'iku area to take back their own quiet nights. So with them focusing on the backyards and the residential areas, then our crew can go into more of those wildland gulch areas.
That's really important. I know at one point there was a bit of a challenge where people didn't want the teams in the yard. And I know listening to testimony at one point, it was a challenge, but
I would say overwhelmingly our residents and our neighbors welcome us. And really a lot of our own staff is from the Ha'iku area. So we're all in this together. And I think with our community Cokey control program, it's really garnered a lot of support in having folks coming into the neighborhood to control these pests.
Yeah, it's really important. And I didn't realize whistling was a part of the job criteria. I would not be able to do it, but you do it, right? But it's one of those things that I live up in Pukalani, so or at least I shouldn't say we don't have any because I don't really know that for a fact, but we don't seem to have any near my area. And it's one thing to hear the cute little whistle every now and then, but when you sit in testimony, even somebody will play something for their 3 minutes of testimony. After about a minute, right, you're really understanding the depth of the problem.
Absolutely.
And so thank you for the great work you do in that arena. We really appreciate it because it's so important here.
Mahalo. We have an amazing crew. It's all of that. It's all them.
I hear you. It takes a team, and you do have you always have had such an awesome team.
Mahalo.
And you've got a lot of upcoming events and some exciting news to share with us.
We do. I think this is the first time we've really released this in Maui. But last summer, our Hana myconia crew and staff worked with a film crew from the BBC to shoot for an upcoming series called The Green Planet, and that's an environment-based series hosted by Sir David Attenborough. And it's really the theme of traveling the world and revealing the secret lives of plants. And our segment is featured in an episode that connects our human world to the plant world. So this is going to be airing on PBS Hawaii, and we're also partnering with PBS to hold a live virtual screening and panel. That's going to be Tuesday, July 26th from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. And those who attend this event will be the first people in Hawaii to watch this episode. It airs later on August 3rd on the PBS network. But our panel is going to feature Councilmember Shane Senensi of the East Maui District, our MISC Operations Manager Adam Knox, our Hana myconia crew leader Asia Akuna, and our Maui Nui Program Coordinator for the PEP program, Hank Oppenheimer. So we're going to have a very expert panel talking about myconia, which is the feature and focus of our part of this episode.
And talk about some of the, first I want to go back to, because I want to ask the question while I'm thinking of it.
Okay.
So you said July 26th.
Yes.
2:30 to 3:30.
2 p.m. to 3:30.
2 p.m. to 3:30. Now, how do people tie into that?
So they can go on our website at mauiinvasive.org. I'm going to be putting out a press release release right after this, which will have links to that.
You heard it first here, folks.
Yep. So they can click on the link and join. It's an Eventbrite through PBS.
Okay, fantastic. And is there a cost to participate?
Nope, absolutely free.
Absolutely free.
Yep. It's an hour-long episode that you'll get to sit and watch, be the first again in Hawaii to watch it, and then the half-hour panel
And
following.
then, great. That's fantastic. Okay, so super excited about that.
Yes.
And then, of course, you'll get the first briefing, and then you can tell all your friends to watch it August 3rd. But yeah, so we want to make sure that everybody gets to that website and registers for that great event. Talk a little bit about myconia for us and how challenging that is in our environment and why.
Sure. So myconia is native to Central and South America. It was introduced in Hawaii and Maui around the 70s as an ornamental plant. It's a very beautiful plant, but in Hawaii it has no natural predators, so it quickly spread in East Maui where it was originally brought in. And myconia, it grows very tall, very fast. In about 4 years, it becomes a fully mature flowering and seeding tree. It has extremely large leaves that can be up to 3 feet wide that not only shade out any forest understory that's trying to come up, but creates a larger surface area to create huge raindrops. And so those raindrops will compact the soil and create erosion, which affects our coral reefs. And then with the rate of growth, they can quickly take over the forest. Their seeds, I think they have about 9 million seeds per plant per year.
Wow.
And they can stay in the soil for over a decade. So it's a complex conservation management technique in working with how to control myconia, but it's really a toolkit in tackling this pest. And so we have ground crew in Hana that works every single day.
I can only imagine.
Doing essentially cutting their own trails, pulling it up by hand, tackling the larger trees. We have aerial operations, which uses HBT, or herbicide ballistic technology. Okay. Essentially, it's herbicide-filled paintballs. And we go, and created by Dr. James Leary with the University of Hawaii. But we go into these remote areas that have maybe individual mature trees that we can't access by foot. And we use, one paintball to shoot the stem, which the herbicide goes directly into that plant, and then it kills the plant essentially and protects the surrounding area
and keeps from all those amazing 9 million seeds that would keep going on.
Yes.
Where are we at in terms of eradication?
Right now it's control and management, so really just trying to tackle keeping it from spreading, outside of Maui Nui. It's now concentrated in East Maui, which is a win in the sense that it hasn't spread, other places. In Tahiti, for example, 2/3 of the island is full of myconia in their forest. So we have been really trying to hold the line and keep it back, and our Hana Myconia crew has been doing a great job in that. There is a biocontrol that's currently being researched and was accepting testimony for back in May, and that's for the Myconia butterfly.
Okay.
And the caterpillar of this butterfly is a natural predator of Myconia, and so essentially it would knock back the populations and help to keep them at bay. And so that's not quite released yet, but that is under testimony and about 20 years of research put into it. It only eats myconia and other melastomes, which is the family that this plant is in. And all melastomes in Hawaii are non-native and invasive. So the release of that butterfly would help not only with myconia, but other invasive plants we may have in our forest.
Good to know, and really important to know, because this is one of those things that, again, like all invasive species, if we don't address it and make headway, it just grows. And, and I won't get into deer. I'll get into deer with Marvin, but and is there anything else, Serena, you wanted to share with us?
Just really important. If you see something different, report it. Let us know. Our community is the eyes and the ears and the boots on the ground that are seeing things every day. We can't be everywhere at once, and so if you see something that looks a little strange, a little out of place, report it. You can call us at 573-MISC. You can contact us at mauiinvasive.org, or you can go to our statewide pest hotline, which is 643pest.org, or the same phone number. And that's just really the best habit to get into to protect Hawaii.
All right, and I'm remiss. I'm gonna capture one of my black ants that stings me all the time, and capture those. They're new, but anyway, I will send one in. Thank you so much.
Send them over.
Thank you, Serena, for joining us and for the great education. Can't wait to see the PBS special. So again, July 26th, go to the website, sign up on Eventbrite, and see it first. Thank you, and have a beautiful day.
Mahalo, Pamela. Same to you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Aloha.
Aloha.
We now get to welcome MARVIN MONIZ, the airport's district manager for the State of Hawaii Department of Transportation. And let me tell you a little bit about MARVIN. He has worked in the aviation industry for the past 35 years, gaining experience while starting off as a baggage handler for Hawaiian Airlines back in the early 80s, then moving up to flight operations while covering aircraft weight and balance, ticket agent work, and dispatching of aircraft functions. MARVIN then moved into the management ranks, taking a promotion to open up service in Phoenix, Arizona as a station manager of operations, along with a few other West Coast airports that Hawaiian served. MARVIN then retired from Hawaiian in late 2006 as the manager of operations at Hawaiian in Maui. In 2007, he took on the new position with the State of Hawaii Department of Transportation's Airports Division as the Maui Airport District Manager. Not just here on island, he oversees 6 airports and 250 employees in the Maui County District that consist of Kahului, Kapalua, Hana, Molokai, as well as Lanai and Kalapapa. MARVIN has a passion for being in the airport industry and an ambassador of aloha, and wants to continue to be Maui to be the best island in the world for visitors and locals alike, while maintaining the culture and spirit of aloha. That is so beautiful, MARVIN. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. Good morning, Pamela. It's wonderful to be here, and now that COVID's out of the way, for the most part, we can be back in the studio. Thank you.
Yes, it's great to be in the studio again. Yeah. And it's great to see the activity at the airport. Let's start with that. Now that we don't have the Safe Travels program active, how has that just shifted things over the last 6 months?
Yeah,
it's been a little longer, hasn't it?
Yeah, a little longer than that. But, I think once the Safe Travels ended, everybody took the opportunity to say, hey, we're out of here. We've been in captivity too long, and decided to make their way here to Hawaii, which is, a good thing after experiencing some, downturns during the COVID period. So, yeah, we've seen a huge increase. Challenging, to say the most,
yes.
Part as we try to accommodate these flights and these influx of passengers that have been coming into Maui.
Yeah, and I kind of just touched on it, but since Serena and I were just talking a little bit about invasive species, one of the things that many know and many don't, that deer had really come down from the surrounding areas heading toward the airport, and you've had to do a major renovation project with that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we, of course, the deer problem, it's currently all over Maui, but we had an incident that a deer did get on the runway about 3 months ago, and we're pretty confident that deer got through an open delivery gate, not so much scaling a fence onto the airport. But having said that, we started looking around, and we didn't realize that we probably had up to 1,000 deer that was in the brush around the airport on the Kanaha side, as well as the north end, the Paia, and then part of the east side near the air traffic control tower. So we had to come up with a plan really quick. Of course, taking on the expense challenge of trying to combat all these deer. So we did work with DLNR and Wildlife Services to come up with a program that we could at least get some of these deer off the airport area. So I think the biggest thing we did was we went out and cut back a lot of brush, pushed it back from the perimeter fencing. We did come out with wildlife in a program to get some of the deer off the airport area and relocate But for the most part, I think we've seen some positive results, and part of it was getting some of the brush back that took the deer further back. But it did create some problems for some of the residents on Stable Road because they decided to set up shop in their yard. So we had to deal with that as well. So as you win on one end, and then it creates a problem on the other.
Right, it's a challenge. Now, did you do some fencing too? I heard you were looking at some unique fencing materials.
Yeah, we did. We were able, I think we spent well over, probably about $250,000 on some fencing. So what we do is we do have a fence currently, 1 6-foot fence with 2 feet of stranded barbed wire, which is up about 8 feet. So, the deer can scale that, as we all know. Once we rile them up, they can jump pretty high, and we've seen it where they get over that 8-foot fence. So what we did was we created a second fence, about 20 feet off of the existing fence. So it kind of made it, you get over the first one now, you might get trapped between the two, and if you're real good, you jump over the second one, that shorter jump. But, so we did do that. We had some challenges in terms of aircraft safety zones that we couldn't put these fences in, but we were able to work with the FAA and come up with a solution that allowed us to put this fence in. So as it stands now, we haven't had an incident since we cut back a lot of the brush and also added this secondary fence.
Well, that's really interesting to me, and one of the reasons is because they say that if deer see that there's a short area to be in, they're less inclined to jump in it. Some people are talking about, now for local homeowners and gardeners, fencing small areas of their gardens where the deer looks at it and they can maybe make it in, but they're inclined to, because it's such a small area, they're worried about getting trapped. So that secondary fence is a really interesting idea to me, to see how that might be working.
I got to take you out there and show you.
Yes, I know. I'm dying to come on tour. We're going to schedule that really soon.
I'll see if I can jump it for you.
Okay, now that would be a feat, and we're going to film that. But it's true. I mean, it's a huge issue, and we're seeing it in more and more of our communities. So when we see it at the airports and understand the impact that has when a deer is on the tarmac against flights, that's something we really need. And you did. I mean, there was such swift action taken on that. It was really exciting.
Yeah. And I think one of the other challenges was that, we try to be sensitive to the surroundings. So, it's where a lot of people think, just go, get a rifle and take them out. But, our challenges was that we do have Kanaha Beach Park. We do have residents in Stable Road. We do have houseless people in the area. I mean, so all of that we had to take into consideration, whether it was, shooting of firearms or using a bow and arrow type of way to go. But we said, there's just too much of a liability and a risk. So kind of chasing them, down the road was a little bit better technique to use. Of course, took a little longer to do that, but I think for the most part we've seen positive results. And every time we run out of water in Maui, which we're facing right now with water drought conditions, the deer start looking for water and they go all over the place. So hopefully, we won't see too much of them coming back, and if they do, they're in a controlled area. So
that's awesome. Well, we've also been enjoying all of the great renovations that you have been doing. So tell us what's new at the airport.
Yeah, there's quite a bit going now. We're kind of actually, we're not so much adding on to the existing footprint. We're doing a lot of upgrades. The south side of the terminal, if you're from the Kihei side of the terminal, we're currently renovating the gates, putting in new carpeting, new ceilings, new air conditioning. As that's pretty much the last side of the upper level, if you will, that's needed some attention. So, we opted to do a lot during COVID, as with the passenger volume being as low as it was, it made it a lot easier to close off certain areas. But unfortunately, contractors were facing their own COVID issues. Getting materials was a problem, and it's still a problem, trying to get materials in here. And in fact, I just saw last night, I think there's a possibility of a train strike. So that will add to it what's already a problem with getting goods out here.
The trucker strike.
And of course labor concerns. A lot of these factories can't get things out. So I feel for the contractors, a lot of them bid these projects in when material was a lot cheaper, and
Right.
now they're trying to get it 3 times the cost. So, but yeah, so along with the upstairs, we're doing renovations in the ticket lobby. We've started replacing all the carousels. We're going to put all brand new ones in there, a little bit more heavy duty, if you will. We're doing some work in the parking lot. We're putting in a water scalping project that will take 90,000 gallons a day of wastewater and convert that to irrigation. So we're kind of excited about that, where we're not, just taking this water and sending it to the sewage facility where we're going to use it.
Where's all this water coming from?
From just throughout the terminal, restrooms,
okay.
kitchens, and some of the other areas around the airport. So we're kind of excited about that. I think we're it was a very costly project, but we think it's well worth it when it comes time to reusing our water. So along with utilities PV, we've got 6,500 PV panels that we've put in over the years. Replaced a lot of generators at the airport. We changed 12,000 light fixtures to LED. Being sensitive to the birds out there also.
Yeah, I was going to say
we did the parking lot, so there's a lot that we're doing.
Meet
now.
the ordinance that's currently being proposed?
Oh yes, we're kind of ahead on that. So
that's good. No, it's a lot of work, and I'm always proud of our airport when we go in and see the tremendous renovations. And, it's the other thing, too. And I love that you say that you're doing the water sculpting for irrigation, because we have that beautiful entrance.
Yes.
Now, and, when people come to Hawaii, they look for that. It's sort of a signature thing that they remember. And I talked to different guests. We have a lot of people that visit my mom from time to time, and they're always talking about our airport, and it's a very pretty airport, and great things are constantly going on there. I was on a conference call actually yesterday with Clearwire, who's talking about this new system that they're trying to do in the state of Hawaii, looking at sort of like the I'm drawing a complete blank on. Thank you, Gary, on the system. Not the Safe Travels program, but the federal. What's it called? Where the rapid check through, the TSA rapid check through. Well, they're looking at like an adjunct to that software, where Clearwire is the only provider that does it, but it's sort of an adjunct to streamline it even further.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's all of this new technology that's coming in, and how are things been going with TSA? We've got maybe a quick minute, but things are going well with TSA. I know at one point they had significant worker shortages.
Yeah, they did, and I think they're slowly addressing the issue. Of course, everybody's struggling to hire employees, so they've ramped it up. We're also actually looking at constructing a second checkpoint that will help us with these long lines that everybody's been experiencing. So we're hoping to get that work started perhaps by the end of the year. And on just a quick note on the water feature that you mentioned, because we do get a lot of calls about wasting water there, but I wanted the people to know that, or our community here to know that we do take brackish water and we use that as a reservoir during the day, and at night all that water goes out for irrigation. So
awesome. We appreciate
saving that water.
Saving that water. Marvin, thank you so much for being here this morning and giving us an update on the airport. We always love this show because things happen very quickly and we always run out of time long before we wish we would. But we're glad you joined us for Business Matters today. I'm Pamela Tumpop, President of the Chamber of Commerce, wishing you blessings and best wishes for a beautiful Maui day. Aloha.